So thank you, everyone. Again, thank you, NGINX folks. It's been great to have you on here, and I'm sure we will catch you online. But now it's time for the field day delegates to spend a little time to kind of reflect on what we've heard today. As I said, first, I'm glad to report that bacon has saved the Earth. That's always a positive development. But beyond that, I think there's a recurring theme here of back to what we heard yesterday from Gus about the primary mission of NGINX. On the one hand, is to build web server things into the web server that we all know, we all love, and frankly, we all use. The entire internet uses this thing. And then add on additional features in ways that can allow that system to do a lot more. And I think that that's what we heard today, right? Because we started with a simple web application, and then we moved from there into an application that does a lot of other things and has a lot of sort of value-added features around it. I wanted to kind of throw that out there to the delegates. How do you react to this? Do you feel like this is, well, I guess, how valuable are those features? Are these things that you sat there looking at and said, my gosh, I wish we could do that? Who wants to kick us off? Maybe Calvin, I know you've got a lot of experience building web applications. I mean, did you see something in there that you felt like was just really desirable?
Yeah, actually, I did. I was kind of excited to see that if you didn't want to be locked into any specific cloud provider, that these tools really made it easily to reproducibly deploy on other platforms and gain some of the same benefits you get from being in like an AWS and using all their tooling. So I just feel like this is a great way to move off of like kind of vendor lock-in in one specific cloud to, I'm hoping and assuming from what I've seen, this makes it available across many, many different kinds of clouds. So does everyone else kind of have similar feelings?
Well, I want to tag on something that Stephen had said on the start is right as they were getting into the simple application, there were a lot of eyes being opened that had never even thought about certain things before, like the NGINX unit and a lot of the ability and the ease of the ability to set up that load balancing, to set up that multi tiered hey, we're going to stand up WordPress and we're going to have it balance across all these instances, and just how easy and straightforward that was actually to set up. I think that's going to make some big difference when it comes to a lot of people who are doing things in a very monolithic way because they just hadn't necessarily had the familiarity of how to go and adopt and leverage this. And that's actually really exciting because I know I'm going to have ways to actually tell some of my developers and some developer friends of how they can actually start doing certain things that are going to be a lot more scalable and a lot more flexible, as opposed to just you do what you do because that's what you've always been doing. And now knowing that there's other better and easier ways that they can actually go about accomplishing these things is actually pretty amazing. And that's just scratching the surface of the capabilities within the platform.
Yeah, I kind of worried about that, the NGINX unit and the kind of lift and shift monolithic coding application style that we're using there. It really feels like we're not leveraging what containers are really meant to be used for, which is like single type processes, very lightweight, easy to deploy quickly. And it sounds like they made it lightweight, but I don't know, it seems like it's encouraging some bad habits or bad practices of developers just to like lump everything back into one application again.
Yeah, and I'd like to just go back to what you were saying about how that kind of agnostic feel. What I've found recently is that now we're working from home, especially like, we're all on Zoom and everything else. Residential internet is not always the best, right? So one of the things I find about when you're developing in the cloud is I might not always have all of the connectivity, and I might not always have emulators or other offline experiences for the cloud tools that I'm using. So what I feel I've seen in this last couple of days here is that there's a whole suite of tools that give me that cloud-like feel and infrastructure that I can run locally as a developer, and that's really powerful. I don't know what anyone else thinks about that, but for me, I think it's a really powerful point.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It is super powerful. Being a developer and having access to the exact same caching mechanisms and the same delivery tool or the same pipeline that's going to happen, I think you catch issues quicker, and you're also not trying to like, well, I got this set of tooling for the developer, and then I've got this set of tooling for when I actually deploy into production.
I'm especially liking there being more SaaS offerings as part of it, and it's just getting started. But the fact that it's expanding and growing, because that especially helps in some of the born in the cloud, living in the cloud model, and knowing you have other options versus the one that is kind of proprietary to the platform that you're using. Because if you're using Amazon, you're using their product. If you're using Azure, you're using their product. This gives you kind of flexibility where you're outside the lines and still giving some of the same functionality, and you can probably drive some of that features back to, go back to F5 or NGINX and say, hey, I really would like if you had X or Y, and they can kind of bring that to market maybe in a more agile or flexible fashion, because you're not dealing with the large scale and space that they have to be dealing with in their large ecosystem.
What I loved in those 6 product demos was that they were built next to each other. So each one was building on the use cases. What I'm actually looking for in these demos is like when people are used to using services like Facebook and Amazon and Google, they are getting this great user experience. So how do you improve that, like get the fast response for the users? So that's what I'm looking for.
And to the point about Amazon, as an example, using those services, and you're traditionally a legacy company, had your own co-location space or a data center, and you're wanting to move to Amazon services. Well, if you want to leverage Amazon services for some of those functionalities and run it across Amazon services and your on-premises services, they're not able to do so in all of the services, because not all the services work with a hybrid model. Some of the services only work with Amazon services exclusively, whereas a lot of the functionality that we were seeing today with Unit and NGINX Plus gives the customers the ability to be able to work across that hybrid model.
Well, in addition to the hybrid model, the multi-cloud model approach applies there as well. Yeah, you make a really good point on that. It may give you some ability that you literally didn't have, prior to that point, and gives you a little more flexibility, so you may not feel as vendor locked into a, one particular bucket or another.
Yeah, and speaking about vendor lock, I'll not mention that company's name, but we all know it. But when it comes to something like NGINX's new SaaS offering, like DNS being hosted and having DDoS protection like that, like right now we all have pretty much one choice if we want that, basically, and it's really nice to see that there's going to be more out there.
Yeah, the more competition in that space, the better it is for all of us, right? I want to go back to what Calvin was talking about with the NGINX unit and his concern around the container orchestration, because I'm definitely torn on that. For me, NGINX Unit was the most exciting thing that I saw, and I know it's not new today, but it was new to me. I was unfamiliar with it, and as a developer, we like to pick the right tool for the job, and it's nice to be able to pick that tool and not pick the tool because I don't know how to put it into production. And what I think this offers with those 7 major languages, and I'm sure they'll add more as it goes, is just an easy way to have the right tools that I want to use and plug them into this polyglot app server that's going to be standardized. That's really attractive. That being said, Calvin, I totally understand what you're saying. It seems like it goes against the containerization theme, and it's like, I just wasn't sure, like, do all my backends have to be in the same container? Can it span networks? Like, there's a lot more there that I want to dig into. I'm just not sure exactly how it works. The way that it was spoken of, it sounds like it scales horizontally. I'm just not sure how that plays with containers.
Now, don't get me wrong. I was actually excited about the unit stuff as well, because I think from a developer experience standpoint, it's awesome to be able to not have to worry about how I'm going to deploy. If I just use the unit base images, I think they just shouldn't focus on the polyglot part, like it's having like a fat image that had 7 languages embedded in it. Like, focus on like, well, if you're going to write the Python piece of the tool, go grab the Python unit image, deploy into NGINX controller, and like, it's just like, I'm done. It's easy. So that part excited me about unit. The part that didn't excite me was I think it encouraged those bad practices as well. I think that we still need to teach folks the right way, because then I think it's still going to be difficult to debug or diagnose issues if there's all kind of this intermingling going on. Also, I don't know what it does to like the security attack surface of any one container if it's all of a sudden it's running the JavaScript thing and the Python thing and the Java thing.
And I find one part that actually really, and it ties back to Unit, that kind of excited me around it is I've seen a lot of demos before where they're saying, look at our web page that we wrote from scratch and we deployed onto this proprietary platform. But this was WordPress. I use WordPress. I've got lots of WordPress out there. And that was actually kind of exciting as to here's stuff that you can do on something that you're already familiar with on this platform, and give yourself that level of, horizontal scale or whatever the case may be on that. And that's kind of really, I'm like thinking like, can I somehow package this and use it inside my existing WordPress deployments? Like those were some of my direct takeaways as I was sitting there watching this. I'm like, this is kind of exciting. And it was so simple as just a mechanism to demo and show the stuff. But I find like there's a lot of cool stuff that NGINX has to offer. And this happened to be just one extra piece of it.
Yeah, if there's any piece of software that's as ubiquitous as NGINX, it's WordPress. And so I think that was a really good use of the demo, and also to show how WordPress isn't just used as a blog or content management system, how it's used as basically a website base to build on. So I really enjoyed that as well.
Yeah, I think that the opinionatedness of Unit is its benefit. It makes it easy for all of you just follow this pattern and deploy.
Also, it's pedigree. I mean, NGINX is great software written by great people, and that's why it's so ubiquitous. And so when I see an application server coming out like Unit from the same team, I mean, I'm on board at least to check it out.
Well, and as we talk about the application server and the ubiquitous nature of WordPress, the fact that the app defense, as well as providing protection and security for WordPress and any other, security members of the stack there is actually kind of exciting, because I've worked with a lot of WAFs out there, and it's nice when there's a good WAF solution that's going to provide you, solutions and I guess a way of fixing problems that you have today, because that's kind of it's not just trying to like, hey, and you need to move all of your stuff to this entire other platform. It's here's something that can address your challenges right now, and this is how easy and straightforward it is to go and configure it and set it up and all that jazz.
Yeah, and I was going to take on some of that, talking about WordPress there, and the hosting space is really, really competitive right now. Okay, like there used to be a huge marketplace, and it was a lot easier to make money for service providers, but that's scaled down. And I mean, you can go and get a WordPress hosting, for a couple of dollars a month these days. I think what you've got in some of this here is a way that you can really come out with a very good offering of WordPress as a service or other applications as a service by pulling all this together. And you could build it on any cloud. It seems to me like a really interesting offering there for startups to provide additional services on top as well.
That's actually an interesting other point that always occurs to me whenever I have these conversations is, I think, again, everybody thinks web server equals client-facing site. But, as we saw here, we're talking about powering APIs. And of course, APIs drive the modern internet and drive modern applications. And, for that purpose, this whole server-based system or service-based, API-driven system, I think this is a really interesting angle as well.
Yeah, I feel like NGINX gets it. I feel like they've not strayed from maybe their original open source roots and are really only making better things for that platform.
Yeah, and speaking about open source too, it's like I've been using them for so long, and what Jared said before about picking like the right tool for the right job, what's really cool about the open source version, because we haven't really talked too much about that, is if I'm deploying a Flask app or a Django app or a Rails app or a Phoenix app or whatever app, 99% of the NGINX configuration is the same. It's like I'm just deploying, from the NGINX point of view, like the same, it's just another reverse proxy, different backend name perhaps. But yeah, I always value that a lot, because it's like one of those things that's a part of your stack, but depending on what tool you use, it's all about the same.
Yeah, speaking of open source, I did check Unit's open source, but they were talking about the service mesh stuff yesterday, and they kept comparing it to Istio. And I don't think we had a chance to ask if the service mesh offering is going to be an open source offering, because Istio is and the other offerings are. I'm just curious if anybody knows about that.
Can someone give a TLDR on what Istio is?
it's a competing service mesh offering.
Never mind.
That's as deep as I know it. I know it's open source. I know it's well regarded. That's as far as I go.
Yeah, I just wonder what level do you need a service mesh like that even? Like, is it getting overly complicated, from an infrastructure standpoint? When we deploy apps right now, we're not even doing a lot of even heavy Kubernetes until we really need that level of orchestration or that level of, whatever that case is, because every layer you add on top is an additional complexity that offers failure and maintenance and knowledge transfer that has to happen. That's a wholly different conversation there, sorry.
No, it's a good one, because one of the differentiating factors they said is that, this new NGINX service mesh is simpler and easier to use than the overhead of an Istio, which I don't personally know what that overhead looks like, but I'm sure that speaks to the people who know that. And I think it's a good point, Calvin, is like, well, once you're going to a service mesh, you're kind of at the point of overhead already, because most of us can get away without one. So yeah, it makes me curious, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the big selling point for WordPress was you just had an Apache running, you threw the files in the right folder, and poof, your stuff was running. I think when you move to NGINX, luckily PHP, mod PHP, or the PHP FPM was very easy to get set up. So I think a lot of folks moved that direction because it was easy. Again, you throw your files in the right directory, you start up the one process, there's just a socket you connect to, it's done. I mean, again, it's more complex, but how many people are willing to like kind of know and deal with all that complexity and just want to get the job done?
Well, getting the job done kind of reaches to a certain point, but when you start getting to complex microservices, ABs, canaries, all this kind of stuff, it becomes a much bigger problem as the business starts being dependent upon these services. And that's kind of where the complexity kind of ties in. So whether it is you're using something like an Istio, or you're using an Envoy, or something from HashiCorp, I mean, there's a lot of options there that people do tend to leverage in those cases. And as you're getting deeper and deeper into it, the complexity kind of starts to shine out, and that's why people start leaning on open source as well as proprietary or paid source tools, because when the dependency of I like to think of like Netflix or something like that, which is a heavily service mesh microservices kind of driven product and services like that. Yeah, that's something you want to make sure your stuff is going to be easy and it'll be automated, and you can run it at extreme scale, and that's when dollars start to kind of flow at that point.
So one more thing I'd like to get to here before we close this out for today is kind of tomorrow. So tomorrow we're going to hear from the hackathon teams. We're going to hear what they're doing with NGINX, what they're doing with this this software, what they're doing with all of this. And I was curious to ask y'all, not to give any teams a boost here, but what would you look for in a cool hack? I mean, are we looking for the core idea of the application? Are we looking for something about the implementation of the application? Are we looking for a clever way that they used the NGINX software? I mean, what's going to impress you from these teams tomorrow?
I think what's going to impress me is if they can take and implement something quickly by leveraging the fact that these tools are opinionated. So it's like that development methodology. How did they like quickly solve a problem? Not how complicated could they make the solution, but could they actually solve this problem in a way that looks real to another team looking at that as a demo, like a reference implementation? For me, I think that'll be interesting to see if these teams can really leverage the tools that NGINX has put out there. They've claimed that these are easy, that they're scale, et cetera. I mean, I don't doubt the scale part. I'm kind of more worried about the developer experience. How do you make sure you can onboard and be productive?
Yeah, and I think that's right. So I would like to see almost like take that entire series of demos that we just saw and produce an end-to-end pipeline. And I would love to see someone build on what there was already there and just take it to an everyday developer workflow. Take it to, okay, I've got it on my local laptop and I've got this pipeline, and then I take it through testing and I take it through to production and so on and so forth. Seeing that end-to-end experience that would really elevate everything that's happened in the last couple of days.
I'll be looking for like if these teams have some great ideas and how if their implementation is cool. So if they are doing any clever things in their application.
Yeah, I kind of in the same thought there as well. Something that's in a way practical. While it's using the technology, the whole purpose of applications development, the work that people do is where there's going to be some derived value out of it. And even if they don't use every piece of the stack through and through, if the piece that they are using happen to be very elegant in order to make the particular solution operate function, that seems a little more exciting to me than, I mean, you could build something that's going to tie in every single piece of it, but it may become highly complexicated and, it checks the box, but at what end, basically, versus someone who does something really simple using a small portion of it, and you actually have something like, wow, we're going to actually publish that thing out, get it out on GitHub, and people start using and consuming that product immediately. So I mean, it doesn't really matter one way or the other. It kind of depends upon what solutions people are going to actually be producing. But I kind of like to see value as opposed to just something prettily using everything.
Yeah, no, I think if they can use these tools to get more velocity and more things done, where they can deliver more, that would be interesting.
Yep, I would like to see someone just focus on one thing as well, especially like maybe the load balancer, right? It's like maybe they deploy 2 versions of their app. Like, let's see what that looks like to deploy, version A and version B and do like a rolling restart and then having, like a 0 downtime deploy, because that's, if you're going to try to roll that on your own using the open source version of NGINX, that's pretty tricky to do. And by very tricky, I mean like very, very tricky.